Very warm welcome as you join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. I am Pearl Naimaka.
And I'm Chiamaka Ohaochi. Thank you for joining us.
We begin with big news. Africa's #1 taxman and Nigeria's tax czar, Babatunde Fowler, has again received honor on the continental stage. On Wednesday, October 24th, 2018, in faraway Gaborone, Botswana, Mr. Babatunde Fowler was re-elected as chairman of the Council of the African Tax Administration Forum, ATAF, for a fresh 2-year term.
Mr. Fowler, who first became ATAF chairman in 2016, was returned unopposed by all council members at the forum's 5th General Assembly and Conference. ATAF was established in the year 2009 and currently consists of 38 national tax authorities across the continent of Africa.
Under Mr. Fowler, ATAF has made tremendous strides. In 2017, ATAF launched the landmark ATAF Transfer Pricing Toolkit in Abuja, Nigeria. The toolkit is assisting African countries to prevent huge financial losses through transfer mispricing. Also under Mr. Fowler, ATAF has given Africa a global voice by presenting the African perspective at high-level talks on stemming illicit financial flows, even as ATAF has launched the Africa Tax Outlook, through which tax administrators in the continent are sharing data.
Earlier in his address before the election, Mr. Fowler spoke about the role of ATAF in building strong tax systems across Africa.
We have been deeply engaged in providing the organization with the required direction to meet its mandate to support the forging of effective and efficient tax systems in Africa. This is a time for reflection and a time for renewal. At a time of increased globalization, and at a time when many countries on the continent are realizing and appreciating the benefits of free movement of goods, labor, and capital, while witnessing an increasing interconnected Africa in an interconnected world. These developments provide both opportunities and challenges when it comes to tax administration.
The ATAF Council chairman also took a peep into the future.
The theme of the 5th General Assembly is moving Africa beyond aid through tax revenue mobilization. While aid is important to usher us to self-sustainability and leads to development when well utilized, it is crucial for African countries to look inwards, modernize their tax systems, and generate revenue through increased effectiveness in tax mobilization.
The following day, election of new members into the Council of ATAF was held. Mr. Logan Watts, the Executive Secretary of ATAF, presented the new council members to the General Assembly.
It is now my pleasure to announce the countries who will serve on the Council of ATAF for the next 2 years. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Babatunde Fowler as the re-elected chairman of the ATAF Council. Then, after that, we elected a vice chair for the council, and I'm pleased to inform you that Mauritius was re-elected as vice chair of council. Africa is now represented on council by Morocco.
After his re-election, Mr. Fowler had this to say.
One thing that is certain is that ATAF has become a voice for Africa on the world platform when it comes to taxation. The tax arena is becoming extremely complex, and every country, developed and developing countries, is starting to fight for their own revenues. Therefore, we stand as ambassadors, we stand as the in-between the developed nations and the developing nations to ensure that all revenue that is due to the African continent is achieved well before the 2063 deadline. I'll call it a deadline.
What does Mr. Fowler think of his new mandate?
We're going into the digital economy. We're going into a situation whereby Africa as a continent has to maximize its tax revenue. And ATAF has played a very important role. ATAF now has what I'll say a seat at the table in discussing tax issues. When you're looking at solutions for Africa, the name ATAF comes up. So leading ATAF as chairman is a lot of responsibility. I have to work with other council members and make sure that we find solutions for each member country.
Congratulations to Mr. Fowler. We are proud of you. Please keep the flag flying.
London, New York or Lagos, business or holiday, home or office, you can now carry out your tax transactions from anywhere in the world. You can now file all your tax returns, pay online, get a receipt and even process your tax clearance certificate from anywhere in the world online and in real time. All you need to do is log on to www.firs.gov.ng and click on e-services and be introduced to the world of innovation, convenience and transparency from the FIRS. You can also pay stamp duty as you register a new company with the CAC or for other transactions that require stamp duty payment online. You can also file your withholding tax returns and determine the withholding tax deducted from you is in government covers so that you can get your receipt within 45 days as long as the deduction has been remitted. Yes, all of this and more online at www.firs.gov.ng/e-services. FIRS, making tax administration as easy as ABC. Please note that all FIRS services are free of charge. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It pays to pay your tax.
Welcome back. In the course of telling you the story of the re-emergence of Mr. Fowler as chairman of ATAF for his second term, we spoke about the role the continental body has been playing in the global efforts aimed at stemming illicit financial flows, IFFs. Between Thursday the 4th and Friday the 5th of October, the African Union organized a panel on illicit financial flows. We are going to tell you that story on today's episode of Tax Matters. But before we go on, what is IFF?
Illicit financial flows are illegal or illicit movement of capital from one place to another. Movement of capital can be said to be legal if the funds are generated from illegal activities like corruption, dealing in prohibited goods like arms, natural resources, wildlife, and human trafficking, and if such funds are received in another jurisdiction with the objective of cleaning them up to make them seem legitimate through money laundering.
Guest speaker and past president of South Africa, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, began by saluting Nigeria and, most importantly, President Muhammadu Buhari for the efforts being made to stem IFFs.
One of the countries that has taken up this matter very vigorously has been Nigeria. And we've seen, for instance, a number of occasions when His Excellency the President Muhammadu Buhari has raised this thing in his own major speeches. In this last General Assembly of the United Nations, Nigeria and Norway convened a special session on this matter of illicit financial flows on the sidelines of the General Assembly of the United Nations just now last month. This shows the way that Nigeria has responded to this matter.
On the decision taken by the African Union to combat IFFs,
the matter was raised originally by the African finance ministers, planning ministers, and so on, because they were very focused on this issue of the need for us to generate the resources that the continent needs in order to attend to its development challenges. The view was that clearly the continent is losing a lot of resources through these illicit financial outflows, with resources which should have been available to help us to develop the continent. The continent loses at least $80 billion in terms of these illicit outflows. We lose this money, it leaves the continent, but goes somewhere. So it's not a problem that can be solved exclusively by what we do as Africans. It also requires that the rest of the world should also participate with us in dealing with this matter. as a consequence of which, for instance, we have, as a panel, had to talk to the United Nations, to the IMF, to the World Bank, to the European Union, to the European Central Bank, and all of these people, World Customs Union and so on, to say this is a common problem. So we need an engagement from yourselves to help us to resolve this issue.
Dr. Abdallah Hamdok of the United Nations Economic Commission stepped in to reiterate the need to fight illicit financial flows.
It is very unfortunate that the poor part of the world is subsidizing the rich. This has to stop. And you can imagine how much we could be able to address in terms of infrastructure, education, health, and all that.
The Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, also spoke about the deployment of technology in the fight against corruption and IFFs.
From the Nigerian perspectives, we have taken major multidimensional decisions relating to institutions, decisions relating to legislations, decisions relating to accommodation of technological development, and applying same in our administrative and governance style. By way of international engagement, Nigeria recognizes the need for international collaboration, and arising from that, Nigeria is equally a member of Egmont Group, and I am happy to report that there was certain setbacks that set into our membership of the Egmont Group, but I'm happy to report that those setbacks have now been surmounted, and Nigeria is now accommodated back into the Egmont Group, which is an institution that allows for international sharing of intelligence relating to illicit financial flow, related to corruption and corrupt practices.
Speaking through the permanent secretary in the ministry, Nigeria's Minister of Finance spoke about efforts being made by agencies of the ministry, especially the FIRS, in the fight against IFFs.
To address IFFs within the context of taxation, our Federal Inland Revenue Service several years ago introduced transfer pricing regulations to curb the incidence of aggressive transfer pricing practices and enthrone the arm's length principle in the cross-border trade practices of multinational corporations as well as indigenous firms. More recently, this administration launched the Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme, which ended in June 2018. BASE was a tax amnesty program aimed at raising tax revenues, regularizing the tax status of citizens, and bringing concealed tax assets into the national tax base. Furthermore, the federal government is collaborating with several countries in terms of sharing information on Nigerians who own properties and bank accounts abroad. We also ran a program for the automatic exchange of tax information with the United Kingdom. In addition, we have signed agreements on the multilateral competent authority on the Common Reporting Standard, which is a platform for exchange of financial accounts information. This will come into effect as soon as the legal framework is finalized. In July this year, President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit bill into law. This autonomous and independent agency monitors cross-border financial flows with a view to identifying and intercepting suspicious transfers. The unit is also empowered to fight the funding of criminal activities, money laundering, and terrorism through the international and domestic financial system.
Reacting to the contributions of the panelists, Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Chairman ATAF, Mr. Babatunde Fowler, commended the efforts of the African Union.
On behalf of Africa, ATAF, the African Tax Administration Forum. I'd like to first of all thank Mr. Mbeki and the panel for the work they've done. First of all, they have shown Africa what we have lost. Second, they have shown us as tax administrators the challenge before us. Clearly, it is certain that Africa needs finances to carry out the promises to its people. We as tax administrators, especially in Nigeria, know the challenge before us. Because easily, based on the size of our economy, we can estimate at least 40% of those funds are lost from Nigeria. I want us to be mindful of it.
There was also a presentation by the Executive Secretary of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption, PACAC, Professor Bolaji Owasonye.
Africa itself is a recipient of IFF. There are tax havens in Africa. We need to also challenge African countries that make this possible. Because some of the meetings that I've attended and spoken at, some fingers are pointed at us. It's easy for us to say that a lot of the money goes out of Africa, but some of the money stays in Africa, and we need to challenge that. So that's number one. Number two, there is evidence of South-South movement of IFF. Money that leaves Nigeria but does not go to Europe, but stays within Africa, but goes to other African centers. We also need to deal with that as part of the measure of charity beginning from home.
And from the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit,
the trends in illicit financial flows are very important. So as far as taxation is concerned, we track funds in the FIU in two ways. One, you track, and then secondly, you restrain it. So going by the Nigerian standard, tax evasion is a criminal offense. In other jurisdictions, it's a civil offense. So when we do analysis, now the first area to pin down and get a suspect is when we look at the tax point. So when we track funds, we look at tax, and then we restrain them, we look at tax. So, but what is new that is coming into the process? The FIU without an autonomy, the analysis was restricted. It was just a very tiny, narrow department under the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. And then everything was centered on STR, that's suspicious transaction analysis from the banks. So, but we also receive CTR. So the CTR is a robust database, and then we are coming now to look at all the money laundering platforms. That is from the Forex market, Bureau de Change, corresponding banking, insurance, capital market, I mean, just name them, real estate and so on and so forth. How people launder money in insurance is completely different from how they launder it in capital market. And how they do terrorism financing is completely different from how they use public accounts to steal public funds. The trends keep changing.
The Federal Inland Revenue Service FIRS calls on all corporate organizations operating in Nigeria to register for the purpose of payment of taxes and obtain a tax identification number TIN. All registered companies must obtain a tax identification number immediately from the nearest FIRS office. You can also collect and return tax registration forms from the Federal Inland Revenue Service Engagement and Enlightenment Tax Teams, FEET, on compliance checks exercise in your area. A company which is yet to commence business after at least 6 months of incorporation must pay a pre-operational levy of 20,000 naira in the first year and 25,000 naira for subsequent years to obtain its tax clearance certificate TCC. Note that filing and payment of VAT and withholding tax returns must be done on or before the 21st day of every month. Register for VAT. File all tax returns as and at when due. Be a responsible corporate citizen of Nigeria. It pays to pay your tax. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Returning to center stage, Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Chairman ATAF, also spoke on other dimensions of IFFs.
Illicit financial flows is a broad term that can be translated into a number of different things, but not limited to cross-border laundering of proceeds of crime, financing of terrorism, the theft of state assets, private sector bribery, and most importantly, the abuse of taxation. And like one of the speakers said before, we keep on looking at funds that are flowing out of our countries, but we also have to look at funds that are still within our country that are not taxed. Any funds that are earned in your country that are not taxed are also illicit. So before those funds flow out, they have to be generated somewhere. Now when we look at the makeup, a lot of people, when you're talking about illicit financial flows or revenue, the first thing that goes to people's mind is corruption or theft. But if you look at the information that we do have, 65% of it comes from commercial activities. That means ongoing businesses. Commercial activities account for less than 30%, while corruption is only 5%. Yes, we're against corruption in all forms, but to us as tax administrators, we believe the non-payment of tax on revenue generated is also an act of corruption. And that still will leave the biggest chunk in the commercial sector, meaning that businesses that operate within our country are also very much engaged in it, but try and whitewash it to make it seem legal.
Mr. Fowler made a request.
We must collectively work together to reduce this illicit flow of money from Nigeria, because a lot of this money that is sent out does not work within the country. One recommendation that we would like to have enacted is maybe stiffer laws and regulations to deter future IFF. And the same way I believe that they handle drug assets, I believe anyone who is caught, or any corporate organization who is caught in such actions, if those assets were to be seized, I think it would also deter and stop IFF from not growing, but at least being brought to a minimum level within Nigeria.
There were contributions from the floor. In response to a question on asset recovery, the Attorney General had this to say.
I just wanted to ask the Attorney General and Minister of Justice whether the legal system that enables repatriation of stolen funds, the international system, have you found it to be moving to a better place? Is it easier now than it was, when Nigeria started with the earlier cases of repatriation? And are there any recommendations about what we can do to ensure that the global legal system is easier?
What you find very easy in the international arena is the illicit financial flow. It takes a click of a button to have the money out of your country. When it comes to repatriation or having that money returned, it is indeed a Herculean task. Herculean, that is not a straightforward affair. It depends on the country in issue. So it's never an easy task. A lot of hurdles, a lot of frustrations, both administrative and legal, and indeed a serious reluctance on the part of the international community in having the money repatriated. So the bottom line is, what can we do as African nations in coming off with a single voice in ensuring that the bottlenecks associated with the repatriation are indeed softened to a larger degree to make it easy for the repatriation of this process. So notwithstanding the international conventions, notwithstanding the international understanding, the repatriation process still remains extraordinarily difficult and cumbersome.
Food for thought. It is hoped that with this heightened focus on IFFs, Africa will begin to see a reversal of fortunes for the better. We thank you most sincerely for watching today's episode of Tax Matters. Let's meet again on this forum Same station, same day of the week, same time of the day. Bye.
Have a great week ahead.